The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, talking baseball with Alan Blumpkin, who's tardy, and Hal Bock of the Associated Press and L. Is here. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Ralph. Ready to roll.
Okay. We've got a situation in New York where there are two major league teams that are disappointing in the same season, highly overpaid, and not living up to expectations on any level. Hal and I are Met apologists and rarely get to talk about the Yankees. So I look forward to this discussion. We will talk about the Mets too and their ineptitude, but start with the Yankees. What a disappointing season, and I'll start with, what do you think the fate of Cashman and Boone is going to be?
I think that Cashman will remain on the job because he just signed a 4-year contract. So he's in his first year of a 4-year contract. And Hal Steinbrenner is not really going to be interested in paying him not to be the general manager. So I believe he'll remain on the job. They're going to have to feed the fans some red meat. And I'm afraid that may be the manager, Aaron Boone, who I think is blameless in all of this, but the manager is hired to be fired, and I think this may be his time to be dismissed. So that's what I think the Yankees will do in the off season as far as the off the field people. On the field is another matter. They've in the last several games, last 3 or 4 games, they've been starting 5 rookies. Now, that means a couple of things. It means, first of all, that they've surrendered, and they just want to see what they've got in terms of future players. So far, so good. They took 3 out of 4 from Detroit. Then they went into Houston and swept the Astros, which is 6-1, and they're home now to play against the Tigers again. So they got a break from the schedule with Detroit in 2 of the last 3 series. But the important thing for them is to see how these young players perform, because they've had enough of the veterans who've gotten them into this fix. And that's what's going to be the rest of the season for the Yankees. And I think the same thing is true with the Mets. They brought up Mauricio, who was their number 1 prospect in Syracuse, finally decided to bring him to the majors, and he's performed pretty well so far, and he will probably play every day at second base. They've brought up third baseman. They brought back the third baseman, Brett Beatty, who had been something of a disappointment when he first came up, and he's playing every day at third base. They've got Mark Vientos, who's probably going to be a DH because they don't have a position for him, and of course the catcher Alvarez, who's got 22 home runs, and including a 3-run shot tonight. So that's what's going to happen in the month of September here in New York as far as baseball is concerned. You're going to see the future on display, and that's probably a good thing. And
you mentioned the possibility of Boone falling on the axe, or however they call it. Anybody on the horizon that may be a future manager of the Yankees? What comes to mind for me is Don Mattingly.
Well, that would be a very popular choice. Is Mattingly a great manager? No. I mean, he's been an okay manager, but he's not he's not Tommy Lasorda. He's not a guy that can really make a difference. I don't think he'd be popular because of his performance here in New York. He's one of the Yankees' most popular players when he played here in New York, and so I think that's probably a good guess that he would be the choice. Right now, he's bench coach in Toronto, and so that's where that's at.
Isn't it risky for an organization to hire a great player like Mattingly? Because Matthews, the same thing. I remember being hired to be fired. That's a great expression. And no manager except the Philadelphia A's manager, Connie Mack, lasts forever.
Well, he owned the team, so he had a pretty good safety latch for himself.
That was yes. Anybody on the horizon besides Mattingly, in your eyes?
He's the most natural selection that I can think of. I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody else out there who would be an appropriate choice.
Okay.
So I think if you're making the pick, I would pick Mattingly. I think that's a good idea. Is it a good idea for Mattingly? I don't know, because it's a very demanding job. And if you don't succeed, you will wind up being criticized. Boone has been criticized ever since he got here because he had no experience as a manager. And he was plugged in, fetched out of the broadcast booth, I think, in Boston, and they made him the manager. Now, he's managed a team for 4 years, I guess, and they've won 100 games, almost 100 games every year, 99 games last year.
Right.
But, of course, they haven't done very well in the postseason, and the postseason is where it's at as far as the Yankees are concerned. They go into every year hoping and expecting to win the World Series. Well, a lot of teams would like to win the World Series, and you're up against it, But he's been a good manager for them until this season, and this season, it's not his fault. I mean, they're at almost 500. I think they're a game under, 2 games under, something like that, which is a disastrous season for a New York Yankee team. So I believe he's going to pay the price.
Okay. Are you happy with the Mets' young prospects? Alvarez, Beatty overall, Mauricio hits the ball incredibly hard. They talk about velocity off the bat. And he hit in his first major league hit was a double, and it was hit harder than any Met literally for the last 2 years. The speed off the bat, that has to be noted. This guy could be one of the reasons that this season will go down as a building block, a disappointment for what was, but hope for what can be. Do you find hope in the future for the Mets?
Well, there's an old saying in baseball: don't believe what you see in March, and don't believe what you see in September. This is September, and it's great to see this kid do well. I hope he does well. Don't forget, he's learning a new position. He's a shortstop by trade, and they're force-feeding him to play second base because they have a shortstop named Lindor. So he's going to have to play second base, and he's got to learn it on the run. So far, so good. I mean, he's doing very well, and terrific. If it keeps up, that'd be terrific. But who knows? You just, it's a small sample. You can bet that he'll be the second baseman at the start of next season. I'll guarantee you that. Again, it's a small sample. Well, let's see what happens. He's a terrific-looking young player.
Hal, I'd like to review some of the rule changes with you, but first let me get to something I read that's really interesting. Attendance, Major League attendance, is up by 9% this year. And they say it's mainly a reflection of the 10-second rule that is automatically speeding up the game. Now, you, me, Al Blumpkin, George Case III, we're all baseball traditionalists. And the thought of what Manfred is doing on a lot of different levels by bastardizing the rule book, the man on second in extra innings, all that. But can we both, as baseball traditionalists, take the time to note that this rule, the 10-second rule, is working? Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct. It is speeding up the game, and that's what they wanted to do, and that's fine. I don't have any issue with that. If I were a pitcher, I might, but apparently they've adjusted to it, and that's good. But I would point out to you that they've shown no respect for the record book. What am I talking about?
Right.
Well, the other night, one of the really best players in the game, Ronald Acuna, with the Braves, reached a plateau. He hit 30 home runs, which is not unusual, but he's got 60 stolen bases, and that's never been done before. Now, why does he have 60 stolen bases? Well, one of the things they did in the offseason was increase the size of the bases. That decreases the distance that you have to run to steal one. Another thing that they did was limit the number of throws over to first base. You throw over twice. The third time you throw over, if you don't get him, if you don't pick the guy off, it's a balk. So pitchers are reticent about throwing over to first base and keeping the runner close. Well, all of those things benefit the runners. And so Acuna has 60 stolen bases. And, I think to myself, what would Ricky Henderson do with that rule, with those two rules?
250 bases.
Something like that.
250 bases.
Something like that. So, I mean, I hate that. I hate when they monkey with the record book. Of course, my position on the ghost runner on second base in extra innings.
Oh,
how did he get to second base? I mean, that's terrible.
Disgusting.
It's a terrible rule. But it is what it is, and we live with it,
But the 10-second rule for the pitchers and the batters, because they've got to be set as well, it's working. So I will reluctantly, I'll give Manfred some credit for this, because like you, and we talked about it for a long time, the bastardization of the rules of the record book disgusts us. And there's more than that. So,
there's no question about it.
I wanted to be fair, and if one takes the time to go back and archive to the archives on YouTube of all of our shows, and we've had 5 years of a lot of talking about baseball. That is the number one thing that we all agree, the bastardization of the rule book. And it's we've learned that from decade to decade, from year to year, you have to compare apples to apples, what's being played today. But when I was a kid, I used to love to go back to the record book and fantasize, what is the worth of a Ty Cobb versus a Ted Williams, for instance, or a Stan Musial? You can't go back in history and compare anymore. And that is the worst thing, because baseball is only played for 6 months, and it's only played once a day. But there's countless hours of as a kid, as a professional like you were, as a professional fan like I was all my life. That's part of it. And that's died. And that makes me really sad that we can't, because of, like you say, 60 bases. Well, what would it be like if those 3 inches on either side? That's important, because you have bang plays every day.
Here, let me give you an example. What's the record for home runs in a single season?
I guess 74.
Well, I don't count anything that Barry Bonds did. I'm talking about let's put it this way. What's the record for the American League for home runs in a single season?
I would say then 61, because you can't compare anything.
Well, it's 62.
The era that Sosa and McGwire.
Aaron Judge hit 62 last year, right?
Okay, now what does that mean against the Yankees of 61? That when Maris and Mantle were going for it. What does that record of 62 mean again? Notwithstanding the amount of games played and the quote asterisk that had to be put up, because they were bastardizing the rule book before.
Well, don't forget they put in expansion teams, which caused the players to be not as good. As they had been.
Then in 68, they lowered the mound considerably to make up for it.
The point that I wanted to make is that most people know the number 62 by Aaron Judge last year. Most people know that number. Let me ask you this. What is the record for yards in a football running back? Do you know? You don't know, and neither do I.
No, that's right.
And what is the record for points by a basketball player? We both know that it's LeBron James, because he said it last year, but I don't know what the number is. But the numbers in baseball are magical numbers that stay with you. I happen to know that a guy who was a friend of mine, I'm blessed to say, Hank Aaron, hit 755 home runs. I know that. That doesn't change. It's emblazoned in my head, 755 for Henry Aaron. And in my mind, that's the record for home runs. I don't count Barry Bonds, because I think that it's a questionable record because of the way he approached it, what he did. So that's how the numbers in baseball have always been very special, unique almost, and in other sports they change and they're not memorized the way baseball numbers are. So to mess with those numbers, to mess with the record book because you want to have more stolen bases, for example, I think that's terrible. That's you're committing a crime against mankind.
It's sacrilege on every level.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. Dewey Heshey.
I'm here.
We don't disagree on much, do we, Heshey?
No.
All right. A Mets fan, and I got to say, our roots, as much as we both enjoy the Mets, what would have it been like if the Giants and Dodgers both stayed in New York?
Wow.
And they waited for expansion for LA and San Francisco. What would have it been like to see Willie in his prime all the way through on a regular basis?
Well, you're in California. You saw Willie in his prime.
I did, but I didn't get here till 1966. It was great, and I'm not complaining about that. But by that time, I had built an allegiance with the Mets, and there was always that split thing. I was a Giant apologist.
See, I never forgave the Giants. They deserted me, and I never forgave them for that. And I was brought up to be a National League fan because of the Giants, and so when the Mets came along, I rooted for the Mets. Now, that has caused me a great deal of hardship over the years, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
As my nephew is a big Mets fan, and I say to him, stick with it because it builds character if you root for the Mets. All the suffering that you go through, it builds character. But
I have that character already built, and but you know what? The Mets have given us some stuff that 69 was absolutely a dream year, and
86 wasn't bad either.
No, it wasn't, but not like 69. And the 86 team was made up of players that were somewhat hard to root for, especially looking back. It was different. 69 had a purity to it. It was, you know how the team was built. You know how the sacrifices on every level to get to it. You knew the incredibly great job that Gil Hodges did. Would you speak to that a little bit?
Well, you know, Gil managed the Washington Senators before he came to the Mets, and it was a kind of a homecoming for him because he had been such a great star in Brooklyn when the Dodgers were there. And when he arrived, the Mets had been basement team year after year after year. Just awful. They were 40 and 120 in their first year, and they never got out of ninth place. I think ninth was the best finish. And Hodges came and he said, you know, it's not acceptable. This is not acceptable. We're better than this. You guys are better than this. And he convinced that young team that it was a team that could accomplish. Now they had some pretty good pitchers. They had a pitcher named Tom Seaver, and another one named Jerry Koosman, and another one named Gary Gentry, and that was the starting three, and they were quite good. And he convinced them. He convinced them that they were a good team, and they went out and proved that they were. Seaver, of course, was the centerpiece of that team, and he would not accept routine losses as routine. He wouldn't accept it. He went out there, and every time he went out there...
Did you get to know Seaver in the clubhouse and how he was?
Really. Not really.
Okay.
He was I found him to be very full of himself, which is a quality that I don't appreciate in anybody. And but it was, I guess it was justified. I mean, he did win 300 games, you know. But
right.
I never got close to Seaver. No, not really. I would say I was closer to Koosman than I was to Seaver. But that team proved, the wonderful part of that team was how bad they had been before that year. And that team proved that almost anything can happen. You never know what might happen. And
right.
they really I mean, they performed a miracle. That was a miracle because of what they had been before. So it was good for them. It was good for New York. It was good for baseball to see a team like that rise up and win it all.
Well, you mentioned the 86 team. We've got to throw in the 73 team for pleasant memories as a Met fan.
You got to believe, right?
Yes, Tug McGraw. I was out here in California, and believe it or not, all the years growing up in New York, when it was a birthright, almost a birthright, for the World Series to be played every freaking year, I'd never seen a World Series game for one reason or another. But I went to Game 6 in 73, and it's very interesting because I've discussed that game with Nancy Finley, former niece of the former owner and daughter of Carl Finley, who actually ran the A's when they were out here. And that series was so special for the Mets because they came back from an early they had a lot of injuries. Harrelson was hurt, as an example, and they came back from adversity from that. Yogi was the manager, Cashin was the GM, and the Post, I remember, had a daily update. Should we fire? You talked about the pressures of New York with Mattingly. Yogi went under this on every day. Should we fire the manager? And that they came back and they won the pennant. Even if they came up short in the World Series, I will still consider that team as my favorite Met team, except for '69, of course, which for New York with the Jets winning and the Knicks winning. Yeah, it was great. A great time. A magical year. It's been a long time.
But this year we're going to have football. We have football starting this week rather, and both the Giants and the Jets appear to be improved and have high expectations. So we've been able to kind of bury the bad memories of this baseball season, and it's been an awful year. And look forward to the Giants and the Jets giving us some happy times.
The Jets with expectations are an absolute surprise.
Sorry, say that again.
Heshy, in 2 weeks when we meet again, and meet we will, I will have a show on the football season, and we can talk about your impressions of how it's going, and we'll do that in 2 weeks. Hope to get Al Blumpkin back, hope to get David Hubler back, and when the time comes, George Case will be ready to come back as well. But until then, I love chatting with you, Heshy.
We'll look forward to it in 2 weeks.
Look forward to it. And the main thing in today's day and age of mortality and getting older, stay healthy for me, please.
I do the best I can.
That's all you can do. That's all you can do.
Adios. Stay well.
Happy trails. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hal Bock was my guest. I'm Ralph Tycho. I'm kind of the weak link of it all, but I can get some wonderful guests. And that'll have to do you. We'll talk to you soon. Good night, everybody.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices, and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.